Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we'll be covering how to use the code that we've generated within the Profili Pro software to actually cut out our wings on the foam cutters using the program software Mach 3. Now before we get into actually Mach 3 and cutting our wings out, we need to first go back to Profili to make sure we have a couple values in our forefront of our memory. Here I've pulled up the airfoil that I created the previous time. I've now transferred it over to the computer that we will be using to actually cut the wing. Again, the left computer goes to the left foam cutter or the yellow foam cutter. The right computer goes to the right foam cutter or the white one. Here in Profili, I'm going to click forward to the tab that says foam block placement and setting. Here there's two values that I need to make sure that I am well aware of. The first one is the DX value, and we can see that by clicking on the wing plan and seeing right here, in this little area here, our DX for this airfoil is set at 10 millimeters. This will be different for every wing according to taper and sweep and things like that, so make sure you come and check what this value is beforehand. So we'll keep in the back of our mind that DX is 10 millimeters, and also that the foam block placement has a distance on this foam cutter, which has a total width of 800 millimeters, of 253.95 millimeters from the left carriage, and also 253.95 millimeters from the right carriage. That's the same for both values, so that means the distance from the left carriage to my foam block and the distance from the right carriage to my foam block shall be equally spaced at 253.95 millimeters. Those values are important to know for the placement of the foam block as we move forward. We've already gone through in a previous video how to export your code, and so I'm going to assume that is already done. And just going to cancel out of here, exit out of Profili, and open up Mach 3. When you open up Mach 3 or the Mach 3 loader, make sure you don't click on any shortcuts that say Mach 3 mill or lathe or plasma. Those just have to do with different CNCs that Mach 3 is capable of controlling. We want to open up the Mach 3 loader and make sure to load the profile that says yellow foam cutter. So I'm going to click on that and press OK. That opens up the interface that we get to work with in order to control Mach 3. And before we do anything else, we're going to make sure that we're actually connected to the foam cutters properly. So to do that, we're going to reach behind the computer slightly. If I zoom out here. Here on the left side of the computer, we have a power strip that controls the power to the foam cutters. I'm going to reach back and make sure that's turned on. A quick way to tell whether or not it's turned on is you should hear hissing coming from the stepper motors. As you zoom back in here, you'll see this red reset button that's flashing. As soon as we go ahead and click on that, we should now be connected to the foam cutters. The way we can tell that is we can click on the arrow keys or the WASD keys, and that should control our X and Y axes for both the left and the right carriages. Those values you should see right up here as the 0 values here. So I go and click on those, you'll both hear them moving and see them moving, and those values up there will change, and the stepper motors over on the motor will also change. We're going to focus in on that in just a second, but I want to make sure we understand that. Before we place our foam block, we have to make sure that our foam cutters are centered. Oftentimes when the program is closed and reopened, like I just noticed here, the foam cutters were actually set to an X value on both carriages of 400 millimeters. So in order to make sure that we're set up properly, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the arrow keys and the WASD keys in order to make sure that the carriages are set up to the 0 position that I want them to be at, and then I'll be clicking on the 0, X, Y, Z, and 4. 4 is just the extra axis that they use to denote here. So in order to do that, we need to zoom out. I'm operating this video camera backwards, so bear with me. We'll be using this yellow foam cutter over here. Here we've got the yellow carriage, the left carriage for the yellow foam cutter and the right carriage for the yellow foam cutter. The wire that runs between them needs to make sure it's centered for both sides. If I'm going to come around here, the best way to make sure that both sides are evenly set is to measure the hard distances between the carriages themselves. So I'm going to be measuring from this yellow platform here up to the bottom of this, and the yellow over to this yellow part here. Normally it's easier to handle the close side versus the far side, and so I'm going to reach over to the far side measure a distance of 24 millimeters. So on this side, I'm currently at 21 millimeters, which means I need to move this back farther so there's greater distance, and the distance on both is the same. And so we don't automatically try to build in some sweep where we don't want to be sweeping our airfoil. So to control this left one, your hands on the keyboard should do the same thing as looking at the foam cutters. So this left carriage will go with my left hand, the right carriage will go with my right hand. So on the WASD keys, I'm going to move in the X direction to move that over 24 millimeters. This is often helpful to do with another member of your team, so if you have two of you to do this at the same time, that's oftentimes recommended. Otherwise, you do a lot of back and forth. I only moved it about 1.5 millimeters, so I need to continue moving it a little bit farther. So I make sure that's centered on 24 and 24. And now I'm going to do the same thing for my y-axis, but for this one, not only do I want to make sure that the y is the same on both sides, but it is at the bottom of my sacrificial foam block. We've got this foam stacked up here so that if you do happen to cut down into it, it won't ruin the table, it's not going to ruin the foam cutters, you're not going to try to run the carriages into each other. Again, you should never be coming close to the limits of these. If you are, then you should need to really evaluate your design and look at how you can cut this better. Even for wings that have large amounts of sweep, there's ways to make it so that that sweep is a lot easier to deal with. If you have questions about that, feel free to ask. But here, the first thing we're going to do, I'm actually going to come over to the computer and eyeball, kind of getting nice and low here to see where the wire is equal to the foam on both the left and the right hand side. Now I want to try to make that as flush as possible, so I'm going to come back over here and measure it to make sure that's correct. So here on both keys, I'm moving them down so that wire is just barely above my foam block. Move down to one side just a little bit more than the other. Those look about center on both sides. Again, if you ever see any flexing in the wire does have a spring attached to it, so it can do some give, but if it's moving at all, or stretching the wire at all, you're doing something wrong, whether it be temperature or how you're placing the wire, and so you need to reevaluate what you're doing. So I'm going to grab my ruler, get on the far part, measure the distance there, which is just about 14.5 millimeters. So I'm going to come here, make sure it's about 14.5 millimeters, and that looks just about the same. And so now I know that my wire is centered both in the X directions in both carriages and the Y directions in both carriages. It's nice and flush with the bottom front of the sacrificial foam that I have here. So if I were to move it down farther, there is some space between this top layer of the sacrificial foam that the wire will not cut down into. So moving back over here to our Mach 3 program. Zoom in here. Again, I'm going to zero all of these by clicking on 0, X, Y, Z, and 4. So X, Y, Z, 4. And all of these values here should now read 0. Now, if I were to use the arrow keys to move this off to some other location, I can click on the Go to 0 button that's right here down below, and it'll snap to that position. This foam cutter is set up to be able to run a lot of different kinds of CNC machines. So what it does, it moves the first 3 axes, X, Y, Z, before it moves the other X and Y for the other carriage. And so typically when you're going back to 0, it's best practice to use the arrow keys to get as close to 0 as you can, and then click Go to 0 to let it do the fine-tune adjustments on its own. Otherwise you might overstrain that last axis that it doesn't move until after moving the first 3 axes. Now that we've zeroed everything, we can go ahead and load our G-code. We'll just do that under File, Load G-code here. I'm going to go to where I saved my G-code after using Profili Pro, and that should have, I'm just going to try to straighten that out so you can see that screen a little bit better. I should have already remembered where I saved my code from previously. It should be in the G-code folder on the computer. So desktop, G-code, 415 for this example.